Hi, my name's Forcella-Burton. I'm the Director of Post-18 at the Lee Academy in Dartford, and this is the first of 5 videos that are designed to talk you through how you go about choosing what you want to do at the end of Year 13 and what you should be doing to get ready for that beginning in Year 12. This first video is designed to talk you through exactly what the options are for you at the end of Year 13. There are 4 main options that you can consider. The second part of the video is going to go on to talk about how you begin the process of making yourself ready for one of these 4 options by thinking about what a good personal statement looks like. So the 4 main options that students from the Lee Academy generally go on and do at the end of Year 13 are here on the screen for you now. So you've basically got a choice between going straight into full-time employment, beginning an apprenticeship, going to university, or taking a gap year. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about each of those options now. So, the first option that you've got, if you have really had enough of studying and just want to get on and get out into the world of work, is to go straight into full-time employment. Generally speaking, year on year, about 10% of our Year 13 cohort every year go straight into employment. It's a really good route, as I say, if you've had enough studying, but the best reason to go straight into employment is if you already know exactly what you want to do for your career and you don't want to waste time, you just want to get on and get started in that career. It's something you've got to be careful of, however, in that if you go straight into employment and are earning good money straight away, you are less likely a few years down the line, even if you were to begin to change your mind or if you saw your friends having a really good time at university, you're less likely to want to change route, because once you get used to earning money, you don't want to give up earning that money. And so you do need to be sure that you don't really want to go to university or do an apprenticeship, for example, when you go into employment, because it is quite difficult to then come out of employment again afterwards and take a financial break to be able to pursue one of those 2 other options. You can earn quite good money straight away if you go straight into employment. However, over the course of your working life, there is a potential that with fewer qualifications, your lifetime earnings might be reduced. So you do need to think and balance up between the short-term benefits of earning good money straight away compared to the longer-term potential loss of some lifetime earnings. Lots of people in Year 13, and generally each year, although it varies from year to year, it's generally about 40% of our Year 13 cohort decide that they are going to go and start an apprenticeship. Now, an apprenticeship is where you go into full-time work, but you are training and gaining extra qualifications while you work. The money that you earn as an apprentice is lower. If you follow the link on the website to the government website about apprenticeships, it will give you an idea there about how much typically an apprentice earns. However, because you are gaining qualifications in the process, in the longer term your salary is likely to be much higher over the course of your working lifetime. Apprenticeships are generally offered at 3 different levels. So if, for example, you finish Year 13 and you decide that actually after doing 2 more years of study in Post-16 you'd actually like to go and learn a trade, then you could do a Level 2 apprenticeship. Level 2 apprenticeships are equivalent to GCSEs and they're generally the entry point if you want to learn a trade. The majority of our Year 13 students when they leave us, however, do either a Level 3 or a Level 4 apprenticeship. Now, a Level 3 apprenticeship is equivalent to studying A-levels. So in actual fact, in many ways, it's a sideways move from what you've been doing in Post-16. However, it is much more industry specific. If you decide that you want to make a progression in the level at which you're studying, then you could look at a level 4 apprenticeship. And a level 4 apprenticeship is like the next step after doing A-levels. Generally, those level 3 and 4 apprenticeships work by your employer sending you 1 day a week to a college where you get face-to-face tuition from the staff at the college, and then you go back into work for the other 4 days a week. And those apprenticeships generally last anywhere between 1 and 2 years. By the end of it, you've acquired level 3 or level 4 qualifications, but you've also been gaining 1 or 2 years of work experience that puts you ahead of the game for career progression. And obviously, in getting those extra qualifications, you are increasing your potential for your lifetime salary to increase. About 3 or 4 years ago, the government introduced something called degree apprenticeships. And degree apprenticeships are designed to find the compromise between students who aren't sure whether they want to go to university or go out into the world of work. Degree apprenticeships, as the name would suggest, lead not to level 3 or 4 qualifications at the end of it, but level 6 qualifications, and that is the equivalent to a degree. They quite often they work in several different ways, but the typical way for a degree apprenticeship to work is very much like a level 3 or 4 apprenticeship, where you spend 1 day a week, but instead of going to a college, you go to a university. The employer has a working partnership with a local university, and they send you there so that 1 day a week you can do your university study, and then you go back into work the other 4 days a week. There's quite a lot of work you need to be doing, homework I suppose, on the 4 days a week that you're back in work. So the academic demands of doing a degree apprenticeship are much higher than doing a level 3 or 4 apprenticeship. However, at the end of the time of you doing your apprenticeship, they typically last between 4 and 5 years, you will have had somewhat of the university experience because you'll have been in university 1 day a week. And you will have got a degree, exactly the same degree as your friends who've gone to university and done it full time for 3 years. But you will have got 4 or 5 years of work experience while you're getting your degree. So if you then think about that, applying as a graduate from university, having done a 4 or 5 year degree apprenticeship, you've actually got 4 or 5 years of work experience that graduates who've just been doing it full time haven't got. An employer is generally going to choose you rather than the graduate who's got no work experience. So they're a really good way to both progress your career and develop your academic qualifications, and in the process increase your lifetime earnings. The tricky thing about degree apprenticeships is that although the number of them is increasing, and generally the bigger the employer, the more likely they are to offer a degree apprenticeship, there is no central way for you to apply for them. When you apply to university, there's a central body called UCAS that you apply to that handles all of university admissions, but degree apprenticeships you have to apply direct to the employer. So they can be quite tricky to find. You have to search through employers' come and work for us pages on their website. And unlike when you just apply for university, there is no set time of the year at which a degree apprenticeship will be advertised. Some people will find degree apprenticeships in the September of year 13 for the following September. Other people, it will be April, May time of year 13 when they get advertised. So you've got to be prepared to do quite a lot of searching if you're looking for a degree apprenticeship, but they are increasingly becoming one of the most popular routes through an apprenticeship. You do need to have good A-level results to get a degree apprenticeship. You are much more likely to get recruited for them if you've got very good A-level results. Every year, about 45% of year 13 decide that they're going to go to university full-time and do a 3-year degree at university. Going to university varies from one cohort to another. Some years in our year 13 we have about a third of the year group that goes. Some years we have 2/3 of the year group that goes, but it averages out around about half of the year group decide that they're going to go and do a full-time degree for 3 years. If they choose to go to a Scottish university, then their degree will last 4 years, however. Degrees can also last 4 years if you choose a course that's got a built-in sandwich year. In other words, you do the first 2 years of your degree at university, and then in your 3rd year, you either go and do a year working in industry. That's really good because it gets you a year's worth of work experience to make you more competitive at the end of your degree. Or if you're doing a languages degree, that's usually the year that you will go and spend a year living and working in the country whose language you're studying. But lots of degrees build in the option for you to do something called an Erasmus year, and the Erasmus scheme is something that gives you a chance to go and do a year studying in a university somewhere else in the world, and that could be anywhere. That could be in Europe, that could be in North America, that could be in Australia. Most universities participate in the Erasmus scheme and will give you the chance to apply for an Erasmus year. You don't usually apply for that Erasmus year until you're actually at the university. So you need to be looking for a degree that's a 3-year degree, and then once you're there, you then apply for your Erasmus year abroad. At the end of that year, that sandwich year, you then come back to your university and you do your final year at university back at your UK university. Going to university can be a life-changing experience. If you choose to live away from home, you suddenly get to experience independence. You get to make amazing friends. In the long term, going to university has one very significant advantage, and that is that most employment experts estimate that the typical UK university graduate, over the course of their working lifetime, will earn something like an extra £300,000. Now, if you think about the cost of accommodation in Dartford, where we are, £300,000 across the course of your working life takes you quite a long way towards buying somewhere to live. So in the long term, there is an advantage to getting a degree from a financial perspective. There is going to be another video where I'll talk to you in more detail about going to university, and then there'll be a video where I talk to you about the financial implications of all 4 options for what you could do at the end of year 13. The final option that is really available to you at the end of year 13 is to do something that roughly about 5% of our year 13 graduates do every year, and that is to take a gap year. A gap year is something that is really, really beneficial if you just can't make your mind up about what you want to do next. If you're not sure what career you want to do, if you're not sure if you want to carry on studying for another 3 years, if you're not sure that you want to get out into the world of work and get locked into doing an apprenticeship, there is absolutely nothing wrong with stopping and taking a step back and giving yourself some time to think about what your options are going forward. There's all kinds of things you can do during a gap year. You can go and work full time, you can go and travel, you can go and do some voluntary work either here in the UK or overseas. But it's really important that during that year that you are thinking carefully about what you want to do at the end of that year. You also need to make sure that you are choosing to do something worthwhile. There are not many times in a person's life where they have the time and the opportunity to just step out of ordinary everyday life and do something amazing, and taking a gap year gives you that opportunity. It can give you a very different perspective on life. And it can actually make you much more employable and more attractive to universities when you come to apply for them, because it tells them quite a lot about you as a person if you've chosen to go and do something exciting, go off and have an adventure for a year. So gap year is something that I really encourage you to consider if you are really not sure about what you want to do next. If you make it an extraordinary year, it can do you nothing but good. It won't be a wasted year. Whichever of those 4 options you decide that you want to explore for the end of year 13, you are going to need to have something called a personal statement. Now, on the website, there are all kinds of links and help that I've put on there for you to help you to write a personal statement. A personal statement is essentially, as it suggests, it is a statement about what kind of a person you are, what you've learned and gained through the studies that you've undertaken while you've been at school, the personal qualities, the skills and the attributes that you have, what your aptitudes are, and all the other stuff that makes you you, information about your hobbies and your pastimes. It's a really good way for a prospective employer or apprenticeship provider or university to get to know you as a person before they actually get to meet you in the flesh. And most of those 3, so employers, apprenticeship providers and university admissions tutors, will use the personal statement to make an initial decision about you and decide, is this the kind of person we want to have with us for the next few years. When you apply for a job, you quite often have to put your personal statement in the form of an application letter. And if you are applying for an apprenticeship, it will quite often be a section on the apprenticeship application form. When you apply for university, there is a whole section at the end of your university application that you put into UCAS, where you have to upload your personal statement. So it's a document that you're going to need whichever option you decide that you are going to do. You'll need to tweak it and adapt it depending on which one of those future pathways you decide to follow, but it is really important that you get the core of a personal statement written so that it's ready for you to adapt and then use whichever option you go for. Generally speaking, personal statements are split up into 4 sections, and you're looking really for a document that feels typed one side of A4, size 10 Arial. If you can fill one size of A4 with that size font, it should fit when you come to upload it to UCAS or onto an application form for an apprenticeship or into a letter for a job. It's generally speaking in 4 sections, and the first section is needs to be focused on what it is you're applying to do. So if you are applying for university, it needs to be focused on the course that you are applying to take at university. What it is about that course that interests you and why you think you're suitable for taking that course. What you've done to demonstrate your aptitude for that course. If you're applying for a job or for an apprenticeship, you need to very much focus on what it is about that role that interests you, how your skill set matches what they're looking for in that particular role. The second section is where you find examples of the things that you have done in school that have prepared you for the option that you are applying for. So people that are applying for university in the second section of their personal statement usually will focus on, subject by subject, what knowledge or understanding or skills or other suitability and aptitudes they've developed through studying the particular subjects that they've done in Post-18. People who are applying for apprenticeships or for employment will do exactly the same thing. They'll go through each subject they've studied in Year 13 and Year 12, and they will pick out what knowledge or skills that they've acquired and give specific examples to demonstrate that they've got what that employer or apprenticeship provider is actually looking for in the particular role that is being advertised. The third section of the personal statement focuses on all the other stuff that makes you who you are. Your hobbies, your interests, a little bit about your background. If you've done things like NCS in the summer between Year 11 and Year 12, what you did on NCS and what you learned. from doing it. If you've done voluntary work during the course of Post-18, you might have something you do serving in your local community. If you go to church, for example, you might have a responsibility at church. It might be you play in a sport team, so you might be a keen five-a-side footballer, for example. Tell them in that third section all those other things about you, so they get to see you as a well-rounded human being, not just as someone who's studied and has got qualifications, because they need to know, particularly in the world of work, whether you're going to fit in with their team. And if you're applying for university, they need to know, what's this person going to be offering to our university community? The final section of a personal statement is where you tell the person that you are applying to why they should pick you rather than someone who has got just as good a qualifications as you. This is particularly important if you are applying for university. The government has given universities in the UK something that they call the widening participation agenda. And that is where the government has identified certain groups and certain types of people who are underrepresented at university. And the government wants to try and encourage as many people from as many different backgrounds as possible to go to university. So it's really important that if you come from one of these underrepresented groups, that you talk about that in the last section of your personal statement. So for example, the government has decided that there are not enough people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds going to university. On certain courses, there are not enough women applying for those courses. Equally, on certain courses, there are not enough men applying for those courses. There are certain postcodes in the country that have far fewer than the national average people going to university. There's lots of different ways that you can tick a box on the widening participation agenda. Now, our school is in Dartford, and the Dartford postcodes send significantly fewer young people to university than the national average. So straight away, just by applying to university from a school in Dartford, you are already ticking one of those widening participation agenda boxes for the government. It means that the university is much more likely to offer you a place if they're choosing between you and someone who lives in a postcode where lots of people go to university. Something else that works in our favour at this point is that we are a non-selective school in a selective county. They know that people that go to grammar schools, a lot of them will end up going to university, but they know that significantly fewer people from non-selective schools go to university. And so the fact that you are applying from a non-selective school like the Lee Academy will actually help tick a box on the widening participation agenda. Now, you don't need to tell them that we're a non-selective school in a selective county, because when I put your university application in, that is in the standard first paragraph that goes on everybody's school reference. But if you tick one of those other boxes, you need to tell them. Another really big one for them on that widening participation agenda is if you're going to be the first person or part of the first generation in your family to go to university. Now, don't be disheartened at this point if your parents went to university, or if your grandparents went to university, or if all your cousins went to university, if your aunts and uncles went to university. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be an attractive candidate for universities. It just means that the other three sections of your personal statement have to be really strong, and it means that you need to be really specific about how what you've been doing for the last 2 years has prepared you to make you the perfect candidate for the course that you're applying to. So everybody needs to have a personal statement. The target that we set every year is that everybody will have written a draft of their personal statement using the 4 sections that are outlined on the slideshow, and submitted to their form tutor on a shared Google Doc by the May half term. That means that form tutors can start working with you on polishing and improving your personal statement, so that by the summer holiday of year 12, you've got a finished personal statement. Now you might still tweak it and polish it and change it when you get back after the summer holiday. You might do lots of other things over the summer holiday that you want to include in your personal statement, but you should aim to have a finished one by the time the summer holidays begin. And if you do it as a Google Doc, your tutor can be writing comments on there, can be correcting things, you can have some communication backwards and forwards. I'm quite happy when you and your form tutor think you've got a perfect finished personal statement. I'm quite happy for you at that point to share it with me, and then I can give you some feedback and tips on it as well. So that is something that you need to be getting underway with. You need to be starting to draft your personal statement. Now, if you find in putting your ideas together against these 4 sections that you suddenly think, oh, I haven't done enough to be able to fill up my personal statement, don't be worried about that either. That just means this is the perfect opportunity for you to try to plug some gaps before you put an application in. So if you suddenly realise, actually I could have done with a bit of work experience, you've got until the main recruitment season, which is the spring of year 13, to get some really good work experience in before you put your applications in for apprenticeships and full-time employment. If you're applying for university, unless you're an early applicant, you can't put your application in until the middle of October anyway, so you've got plenty of time to get some work experience that might relate specifically to the course that you are applying for. And if you suddenly realise you could do with having some voluntary experience showing up on your personal statement as well, then you've got months. If you start this at the Easter of year 12, you've got months to be able to find opportunities to get some of that voluntary work in to put on your personal statement. So on the slideshow, I've given you one of our successful students' personal statements. This is a student who applied to Russell Group universities and was accepted by them, so they are the Premier League of universities. So you should consider this as a good example. I've broken it down for you so that you can see we've got the first section, which is why this student felt that they were particularly suitable for the course that they were applying to do, which in this case was sociology. The second section about the skills and the aptitude that this student has demonstrated over the course of the last 2 years for the particular course, giving specific examples that they can then talk about if they get called for interview. In the third section, this student has given you lots of examples of things about them, things that tell us more about them as a person, things they're involved in, things they're interested in, things they've got involved with. And finally, the last section is all about why choose them rather than someone equally well qualified. And just as a note to you, this is someone who's got both parents who've been to university, and therefore they can't claim that I'll be the first in my family to go to university card, but they talk very specifically here about why they are particularly suitable for the course that they've chosen. As I say, this personal statement led to 5 offers from the 5 universities that this student applied to. On the website, I've included lots of other examples of personal statements that were written by our students that all led to those students getting offers from university. Now, very important note about that, those examples are quite often the draft version, so they're not the perfect finished polished ones that got sent into universities in all cases, and you cannot copy them because universities, employers, apprenticeship providers, they all use plagiarism software to spot whether someone is trying to pass someone else's personal statement off as their own. So use them as a guide, but don't copy them. So that takes us to the end of my introduction to the 4 options that you've got for the end of year 13. On the website you will find everything you need to help you to write your personal statement, and you will see that there are pages there that are going to talk to you in more detail about employment and apprenticeships, gap years, going to university, the financial implications of whichever of those options that you choose, and then pages about what you should be doing next and when you should be doing things. So the next video is going to be focusing on employment and apprenticeships, if that's the option that you decide you want to follow.